Today I sat down and realized that it's been exactly 2 years since I did the first startup video. I sat over there at my dinner table, laid out a whole plan for how I was going to build an app, and then I did it. And in these 2 years I've made 80 YouTube videos and countless of shorts, so much Instagram content on both shorts as well as in the story format, and I've learned so much over this time period. So I thought, since I've taken you all along with me on this journey, I might as well share some of the learnings which I've made over this time period as well. So before you click off, this is going to be a little bit of a different video. It's mostly going to be audio, like it's going to be this talking head, you know, no fancy animations, no full edits or anything like that, just me talking, probably unedited as well, because I want this to be raw and like just me reflecting. I have no script, nothing like that whatsoever. I just have some bullets that I've written down about the stuff that I've learned. But I do think that this is a very valuable video, probably one of the more valuable ones that I have made thus far. If you're interested in this kind of content, then go do your dishes, go do your laundry, sit on your couch, whatever. Like, you know, this is not a video you sit down and watch on a like screen. This is more of probably like an audio form of content. But let me walk through the stuff that I've done over this time period. So first of all, as you know, I built the Wonder Sagas app, which is what I initially did when I did the whole starting a startup series. I took a concept that I had, an idea, and then I executed upon it, which was essentially to build a children's story app, where I bought stories, I paid ghostwriters, and I just made a whole app interface, as well as like did some quite complicated content buying and like legal stuff in order to get the rights for all of these stories for kids. I built the app, I made a YouTube series about it, I shared all the learnings, I shared the whole process. All of that is up there on YouTube, episode 1 to 50 on the Starting a Startup series in the channel that you're watching right now. After this, I made a new app called Arbster.io, which is essentially an arborist job planning app for arborists, people who work with trees, how they can plan their jobs and like do risk assessments. There's a little bit of toolkit in there, and that's pretty much done now. We're going to get to the marketing phase of that this September. So it's now July 2023. And I'm reflecting about everything that's happened since July 2021 when I started this whole venture. So this is going to be high and low. These are learnings in no particular order, just stuff that I've jotted down in a bullet point form. So there's no script whatsoever. It's just me talking about what I've learned, what I've experienced, etc. Probably there's so much more to learn, and obviously I'm not probably reflecting on all of this correctly at the very moment that I'm recording this, and there's always so many more reflections to be made. However, I do think that these are some of the more important ones and some of the more interesting ones that I have made over this time period. So reflection number 1 is that ideas suck. Essentially what I mean by this is that there's so many ideas in the world. You can have an idea about how you're going to do something, you can have an idea about something you want to do, but these ideas are essentially useless until you execute upon them. Having an idea, that's just human nature. Everyone has ideas. You walk around, you get an idea whatever you do, you head to the grocery store, you get an idea, this would be an interesting thing, or I really want to do this with my life, I really want to move to this country, I really want to do this thing. And everyone has these ideas, and as a society we tend to overvalue these ideas. We think, okay, my idea is the same as the execution upon this, and it doesn't really equate at all. Like I've gotten so many DMs of people saying, hey, I have this idea, do you want to partner with me and build this app with me? It's a fantastic app idea, I think it's going to do great, we'll split it 50-50 just because I have the idea, you'll do the execution. But the thing is, that doesn't equate at all. Like a project like that, like building an app, starting a business, whatever you want to do, 99.9% of that is the execution. The other is the idea. Ideas are simple. Like now you can hop on ChatGPT and generate an idea. So I guess the reflection there is that everyone has ideas, very few people execute upon them, and then even fewer people actually manage to achieve something great with that particular idea, which I haven't really managed to do yet. That's coming though, trust me. So that's quite an interesting reflection. I think that was important enough that I even made a separate video about that called Ideas Suck. You can go back and watch that one if you want details on this particular point. Then the reflection number 2 is that with delusional confidence, you can do anything you want. This is not meant to be like a motivational thing, but this is something that I've come to realize both in my private life as well as my professional life, as in my day-and-time job, but also this whole starting a startup venture. If you are confident enough in your own abilities, almost to the point where it's borderline delusion, like you shouldn't be this confident in your ability to execute on this particular thing, you will be able to do it. Because there are so many things which they seem much more difficult than they actually are when you have them in your mind and when they're an intangible idea. However, as soon as it becomes tangible and you start doing and executing upon it, it becomes so much more simpler. You begin to understand, you begin to build schemas on how you can process this information and work with it, etc. So I've kind of decided to from now on take the approach where if I get something, if I get a question, if I get a task, whatever, I'm going to approach it with delusional confidence, meaning that I'm going to be so confident in my own abilities to execute and do this particular task that it's borderline delusional. Like I don't really have these skills yet, but I will develop them throughout the time that I'm doing it. For example, my first app, I had never really built a production app before. I never dealt with all the legalities, like the privacy terms, the EULA, the rights to the works that I'm using for the stories, etc., for that children's story app. But I just did it, I started it, and I was delusionally confident in my ability to figure the stuff out as I was going, and that's why that app ended up being made, essentially. And the third reflection that I made is that you need to have patience in the macro, urgency in the micro. And what I mean by that is that, like, look at this channel, for example. I've been doing videos every week for 2 years. I barely have 2,000 subscribers. Like, I've made probably $40 from this thing in total. It's not really, you know, worth the time in that way. However, what I do think is that this is not like a 2-year thing. This is whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm working on at any given moment in time, it's a 5, 10, 15, 25-year thing. Meaning that I believe that whatever I do is going to have an impact on my life over the next 20 years. Like, it's a long-term bet. Like, if you will, I'm documenting this just so they can put it in my documentary in 20 years when they want to look back at, okay, what the hell was I doing 20 years ago? Like, where did this start? And that's why I think about it, it's cool. And I get that that's a very cocky thing to say, and that's part of the whole delusional confidence part from the last reflection. But that's really how I'm looking at it and how I'm approaching this whole channel, etc. And the same thing with my apps. Like, even if they don't succeed today or next year or the year after that, in the long term, having built those and having the experience of, you know, taking it to market, dealing with all the legalities, dealing with Apple, dealing with Google, all of those things which I'm learning, that's going to be a great foundation for whatever is going to come in 10, 15 years. Like, this is a long-term play. This is not a short-term thing. However, urgency in the micro, what I mean there is that if you can get something done today, it's better to get it done today than start tomorrow, for example. Whatever that quote is. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The next best time is today. And so if you can do stuff now, and like if you can work relatively significant amount of time, like put effort into it, etc. now, that will pay off in the long term. So if you can have urgency in the micro, do it, but also you need to have patience in the macro. Number 5, this one kind of explains itself, but building an app is quite difficult. Getting people to download that app is much more difficult. And getting people to actually spend money on that app is almost impossible. Like, I've spent, I don't know how many months developing apps in total. I've gotten quite a few downloads, like probably 15 or so paying customers, or like recurring paying customers, out of, you know, so many hours spent on building, significant hours spent on marketing, and then still, like, that funnel of time invested is so narrow. And what I mean is that you obviously think that the big part of something, or of an idea, or the execution of the idea is going to be the execution. But then the actually commercializing, actually getting that thing to be mainstream is what's so much more difficult than just creating that in the first place. And I think people often tend to get those switched around. I certainly did at the beginning. I was thinking that building the app is going to be the difficult part, and then getting people to download it's going to be easy because it's such a good idea, I thought. But that's not really the case. And that's, again, back to the first point, that ideas really do suck. It's really the execution, how you execute upon it, that really matters. Number 6, consistency is easy if you enjoy the process. So what I mean by this is that, pretty simple actually. If you enjoy the process, if you actually enjoy what you're doing, like I enjoy making these videos, I enjoy working. If you are enjoying whatever you're doing, it's going to be easy to be consistent, because it doesn't really become a task or a chore or whatever. Like, for me, when I want to record a YouTube video, that's not something I feel like I have to do. I feel like it's something I want to do. Just like if I want to get to coding, for example, I feel like that's something that I want to do, as opposed to feel like I have to do it, which makes it so much easier. And what's made it possible for me to do this every week, multiple times a week, for 2 years in a row. And obviously even before that, before I was documenting all this stuff, I was already doing other things that I did enjoy doing. Number 7, if you learn something from an experience, none of that time that you invested into that particular experience was wasted time. And what I mean by this is that if I look at my first app, for example, which is now a little bit on hold, but I probably will pick up on later on. If I look back at that seems like that was wasted time. I spent so much money acquiring the stories, probably like $7,000 on acquiring stories and paying for voice actors to voice those stories, but also so much time I spent building that app. However, what you got to consider is that all of that time and money that I did spend was stuff that I learned stuff from. Meaning that I learned about how to deal with Apple, I learned how to take an app to production, I learned about legalities of stories, etc. I learned about, you know, the development cycle and bug fixing and all those little details that you learn along the way. And that goes for anything. Like, if that's a personal experience, like you meet someone or whatever, you have a friend group, you go on a trip. If you learn something and you can honestly say to yourself that I took something valuable away from that experience was not wasted whatsoever. Number 8, and this is a little bit of a social media reflection, and this is like, people are not watching you. You have no ops, you have no haters who really care about you. Like, people don't care. You're not the main character in anyone else's life except for yours. And what I mean by this is that when you first start posting stuff on social media, like I did with these YouTube videos, I was like, okay, maybe people are gonna judge me. Actually, like, if you go back to my YouTube channel, this the first video that I talked about at the beginning, I recorded that in August of 2021. However, I didn't post it until November 2021 because I was a little bit shy. I was like, what if people are going to judge me? What if people are going to copy my idea? What if people are going to, care what I'm doing? And the thing is, people don't care. Like, everyone's so busy with their own lives, their own problems, their own storyline, that no one cares about what you're doing. Like, I've said this so many times. If you get 1,000 views on YouTube, or you get 1,000 subscribers, 990 of them are not gonna care about you at all. Like, you could die tomorrow, no one would care. 9 of them are gonna be like great fans. They're gonna be your best friends. They're gonna be the people you meet online who support you. They watch every single video. They leave a comment, etc. Maybe 1 or 2 are gonna be the ones who like leave hate. And if I look back at all the comments that I've gotten, almost, the vast majority is just people who are inspired, people who want to leave love, people who want to, talk about their own experiences. And very, very few, probably like 4 or 5 out of all these hundreds of comments that I've gotten are like hate, people who hate on you. Like, I remember I posted one video showing everything that I made for my first app, and someone left a comment like, oh, I make more cleaning toilets, bro, get a real job, or something like that. And it's like, that's what it's like. And you gotta realize that that's coming from a place of hurt. Like, if someone takes the time out of their day to leave a comment on your video about you doing something which you perceive to be good, just to leave hate there, that's because they have something fucked up going on in their life. Like, they're not coming from a place of good, they're coming from a place of hurt. And I think that's just how you're gonna think about it. But also, don't be afraid to do whatever you want to do. You're not the main character, like I said. No one's like stalking your Instagram to see whatever you're up to because they want your life to go to shit. People really don't care. You're not that special. And I think once you start to realize that, that's when you become comfortable doing things like this. Like, I'm just sitting in my closet talking to a camera like a freaking maniac at this particular moment in time. But also, that's when you become comfortable like posting your life on social media. Just not because you want other people to validate you, or just because you want to show people what you can do, but more because you enjoy the process and you think there's more benefit to it down the line. Number 9 is that when you build a product, a service, whatever, get customer input as soon as possible. That's kind of like something I failed with for both of these apps that I've built. I waited relatively significant periods of time before I actually got customer input. And then for one app, I had to make some significant changes, the Arbster one. I had to make some significant changes for it to become clear for the customer. And for the first app, I think that's why it kind of failed or never really took off, was because I just developed it by myself without any real input from any actual customers. And I think if I were to redo both of them, I'd get customer input so much earlier, probably even in the design phase of like the UI design of the app, not just and even the functionality that I was going to put in the app. Because now I built a functionality based on what I thought was going to be good, and then I got feedback and altered it after that. But I think if I were to start again, I would involve them much earlier, just so that I can get a real customer perspective as opposed to my perspective of how I think that is meant to be built. Number 10 is to have at least some like-minded individuals in your life. And what I mean by this is you don't need to have someone who wants to also make YouTube videos, or also want to build apps, or do whatever you want to do, but also people who are positive, people who support you. If you have people who are negative, that's going to rub off on you for sure. Like, there's nothing that's going to kill your drive or kill your passion more than anything than friends, or so-called friends, who are negative towards what you're doing. Like, if they always criticize you, they're not really supporting you, cut them out of your life, man. Like, there's no point to have them there. Like, I've been so fortunate to have a friend group who are really, they're not really into the same kind of stuff that I am. Like, they're not building apps in their closet in their free time, but at the same time, they've been super positive towards it the whole time. They've been super supportive. They've helped me a lot. So like, I don't mean like-minded that I need to be pursuing the same things, but I mean like-minded as in people who support you, people who are positive towards what you're doing. I've seen other people have friends who are like criticizing them, they're kind of hating on them, they're probably a little bit jealous. And I think if you have those kinds of people in your life, that's going to really impact you negatively in the long run. Number 11, periods of intense focus are great for getting shit done. So I've had plenty of these periods over this two-year period, where it's like you're doing for 2 months, you're not going out on the weekend, probably a little bit antisocial, but I think that can be good during particular months of the year. But where you're locked in, you're probably working 70, 80, 90 hours a week, like you're sleeping for 5 hours some days because you're just enjoying the process, you're loving the grind. And I think if you get to that point where you're really in that flow state continuously, like you're waking up, you're thinking about, okay, this is what I'm going to execute on today, you go to your job, you come back, you do whatever, and if you're in that flow state, I think you're really going to enjoy the process. And that's also where you're going to get so much much stuff done, because you're gonna be in that productive state of mind. Like, you're not really thinking about any distractions whatsoever. You're just thinking about whatever you want to do. And I've had a couple of those, for example, this year. And again, this is this stupid thing going around into it, or maybe not stupid, but they call it monk mode, where essentially you kind of isolate yourself for 2-3 months of the year. Mine was like January to March. I essentially just worked during that time period and got so much of my Outsource app done during that particular time period. But what it essentially entails is that you cut distractions out of your life. Like, you're not really going out. Of course, you're spending some time with friends, but you're not really going out partying. You're not really missing any days because you're hungover, whatever. You're just focusing on work during that particular moment in time. And I think those can help you so much, because you get so much done. Like, in a 3-month period, you can probably get done what the average human would get done in a year. Number 12 is to focus on maintaining the contacts and relationships which you build over your life or over any period of time which you're working. Like, over these 2 years, I've had people who do voice acting, I've heard people who write stories, I've had people who do UI design, I've met like copywriters, I've met like-minded coders who've helped me with things online, I've met designers. And if you keep this in your life, that's going to be such a good asset for you later on. Like, for me, for example, if I need someone to do a voiceover for something, I got a girl for that. If I need someone to do UI design, I got a guy for that. If I need someone to build a website for me, I got another guy for that. And I think if you have built those relationships, you might as well make sure to keep them over the long run, because I think that's going to make you an asset just because you're that well connected, but also that's going to simplify your life whenever you need a service or anything like that. So if you're building those connections over time, make sure that you keep them in your life over the longer term. Number 13 is, if you can and if you can afford to, outsource what you don't enjoy doing. So for example, for me, I'm not really good at, and I don't really enjoy doing the UI design process, for example, or some of those things. So what I've done is that I've outsourced that to someone else, someone who's much better at it than me, much more efficient at it than me. So for example, maybe I pay 200 euros for someone to do that. My time is probably, 200 euros, that's probably 10 hours, 8 hours, 7 hours, whatever you want to put your time of my time. And I would spend so much more time than that doing it, and I also wouldn't enjoy the process. So if I can outsource that for someone, that's just better unit economics than if I did it myself. And if you can do this, I think that's gonna, 1, get better results, and 2, make you enjoy the process more, because you can kind of cut out those pieces which you don't really enjoy doing. Number 14, fitness is the first step before greatness. I'm not sure where I heard that quote, but that's something which has really resonated with me over this whole 2 years. I've been hitting the gym probably 5 or 6 times a week, doing cardio as well, meaning that I've stayed in quite a good shape. Like, I was a thick-ass boy for a period there in November when I was bulking, but now I'm feeling pretty good, and I haven't really had any sick days during this whole 2-year period, which is probably due to the fitness side of things. But also just because it clears your mind. It's a little bit like therapy. You're working, you go to the gym for an hour, you lift some heavy ass weight, put it back down again like a real meathead, scream a little bit, you're thinking you're Ronnie Coleman, you just feel good. And I think if you're feeling good, then it's going to make it so much easier to just work on all of your other stuff and for you to be productive. Like, that's what's going to allow you to really have those locked in periods where you're like just sitting down, working for 3 hours straight, just because you're exhausted from working out and like you don't really have any built up energy. You're just ready to work. So I think that's probably one of the best things in my life, or one of the biggest contributors to like my productivity, is hitting the gym, working out, exercising, and like I said, fitness, greatness. Number 15 is that something that I've reflected on, and actually something which my friend told me like a week ago, and that I've also reflected on a little bit, is that the number one thing which you can do is to provide value. And there's nothing that will trump you providing value on social media, on whatever product you're building. So my example is YouTube. If I take the videos where I'm providing value, like I'm providing entertainment by building an app in 3 hours, or I'm explaining some Flutter thing, or I'm doing like a life in my weekend which people kind of enjoy watching because they want to picture their life in there, whatever, compare that to something which is more of like a personal diary for me, where I'm just, this is an evening coding session, or this is a standard Saturday. If I compare those, the ones where I provide value are getting so much more traction, so much more love, so much more engagement compared to the other ones. And I think that's something which I've started to realize that now later on, that if I want to actually, make a positive impact, I need to be providing value, not just documenting my life and my journey. I think if I'm documenting, I'm providing value for myself. If I'm doing the other types of things, I'm providing value for others. And if I do that, I think I can create exponential value, because I can reach so many more people in that way. And I think that's how you should be approaching everything. Like, if you can provide value for other people in whatever product you build, that's going to be a good product. In whatever service you build, it's going to be a good service. In whatever content you do, that's going to be good content. Number 16 is fuck being cool, just be yourself, because that's cooler than anything else. That sounds so cringe when I say it. I thought it sounded so cool when I wrote it down. But what I mean by that is that if you were to, you know, hop on a trend or, you know, whatever on social media, that's not really you. Like, and I feel like this is an interesting take as well, because this is also something which I've talked about with my friends before, like reflected on myself, because I'm not really like 100% myself when I'm making these YouTube videos. I'm like the professional version of me, I'm the serious version of me, but there's so much more to my like personality, my character, than just me sitting in front of a camera, talking, building apps, being all professional, being all serious. Like, there's missing my whole like funny, goofy side. Trust me, I have a bit of that too, but that's not really seen at all. And that's something which I need to work on integrating more, because I think that's my personality, and I think that's what's going to be cool at the end of the day if you're yourself, as opposed to trying to be someone who you're not, because that's never going to be authentic, that's never going to be good, and or it's not going to be as good as it possibly could be. But I also mean that in the sense that I don't think it's particularly cool to be making like apps in your closet, for example, but that's what I want to do, so fuck it, I don't really care if people think that's cool or not. I'm not really, you know, gonna hop on some TikTok trend and, you know, do gym content just because people will think that it's cooler. This is what I want to do, so this is what I do. No more questions about it. Just do you. Number 17, and this is a quote I heard recently, and that is, sitting down to write is always much harder than writing. And it's the same thing goes with working. Like, sitting down to work is almost always much harder than actually working. So there are so many instances where I've come home at like 8 o'clock from the gym, I've been at the job all day, and I'm like too tired to sit down and, you know, start coding, start working, start editing, start planning, whatever I have to do that particular evening. But there are so many instances where it's like, yeah, I have had days where I'm like, okay, I'm not even gonna start because I can't be bothered. But there are also so many instances where I've forced myself, like with discipline, with whatever, force of will, the will of God, I have no clue, to sit down, start working, and just get going. Because once you've done that first 20 minutes, you get in the loop, you get in that flow state where it's like you can probably sit 5 hours. There are so many times, especially building Arbster during this spring, in that period of like January, February, March, where I probably started at 8 o'clock and I just got caught in it, and I found myself at like 1:20 in the morning still working. I was like, okay, you gotta go to bed now, Herman, you got a job tomorrow. It just happened to work out that way, just because I got in that flow state and I did start. So if you can force yourself and have the discipline to actually start, I think whatever creative passion you have will take over after that actual starting point and carry you through actually finish the task which you have to complete that particular time. Number 18 is that work will expand to occupy whatever time allocated to it. And I think this is called like the Parkinson principle or something like that, meaning that if you allocate a certain amount of time to a particular task, that the scope of that task will expand to fill that amount of time. And an example of this, I think, is a Steve Jobs thing at Apple, where they had some Mac feature, I think it was like Mac webcam or something like that, and they had to fix some software feature for it, and they were already delayed with the launch of the Mac, and the software team went to Steve Jobs and he said, this is going to take 2 weeks for us to do. And the Mac launch was in 1 week. And I think Steve Jobs said, there's nothing possibly which would take you 2 weeks that you can't do in 1 week. Get it done. And sure enough, they did get it done, and they launched the Mac on time. And I think that applies to anything. Like, if you say, okay, I'm gonna have this sprint and I'm gonna do it over 3 months, that sprint is gonna take 3 months. But so many times you could say, okay, this sprint is gonna take 2 months, and that sprint will also take 2 months. So work will expand and contract based on the time that you allocate to it. So I think you need to here weigh like stress as well as urgency into this. If you're very urgent, then you can probably squeeze your timeline, but also you shouldn't squeeze it enough to a point where you're becoming stressed and it's like burning you out, hurting you, etc. But I think that's something which is good to consider, that often the scope of a task will expand or contract to occupy the time allocated to it. Number 19 is, and again, this I'm a little bit part of this, I'd like to think, but everything is available on YouTube. Like, anything what you want is available for you to find for free on YouTube. You know, you can search up, I have this particular blender, how do I fix the blade inside of it to the left or whatever. And sure enough, there's gonna be some guy in Bangladesh who's sitting there in his basement fixing that exact particular blender in a way which is possible for you to understand how to do it yourself. And the same applies to, like, if you want to learn something, if you want to learn how to code, edit a video. There's so many people who just do this. Like, they do this for fun, just because that's their passion. They make money from it. Some of them just do it because they enjoy it. And I think we'd be stupid enough in this generation if we don't leverage all of that power, because this is something which other generations didn't have. Like, in one way, this is the time to be alive. Like, the future is now. The information is all at our fingertips. We can just search for it, find it in a super digestible way. So I think I've made so much use of all of these resources, as particularly YouTube, but also all other things on the internet. And I think if you do that, you can learn exponentially compared to if you were to learn in more traditional ways. And number 20, and probably what's going to be the last reflection of this, is something which I've learned relatively recently, or really thought about recently, and it's also a quote that I came across somewhere, and it is, what if it could turn out better than you could ever possibly imagine? And I think if you approach things, and I've started approaching things this way, but if you approach things this way, nothing's ever going to be regretful. Because if you approach things with the mindset that, okay, I'm going to do this particular thing, whether that be starting a business, writing a book, doing some creative endeavor, meeting a particular person, if you're scared of it, but you approach it with the mentality of what if this could turn out better than I could ever imagine, there's never going to be any downside later on, because then at least you found out, did it turn out better than you imagined or not? And I think if you don't try it, then you're opening up for regret. Then you're going to be able to look back at it and think, okay, shit, maybe I should have explored that. Maybe I should have done that. But so I'm trying to look at things in a manner of, what if it actually could turn out better than I'm imagining right now? How great would that be? And if you do that, I think, one, you're gonna execute on more things, but also you're gonna prevent any type of regret in the future. That was quite an interesting video. Those are my main reflections from these 2 years and these 80 videos and hundreds of pieces of social media content. Quite interesting. And I think this in particular is gonna be an interesting video for me to look back in like 10, 15 years. Like, was I right? How much of this have I left behind me? How much of this have I evolved upon, etc. But I hope, and I genuinely, sincerely hope that if you are in a position where I was 2 years ago, you have an idea, you want to start something, you want to try something, I hope this can help you in some way. If it does, that would definitely make my day, if that just helps even one person. And if it does, please leave a comment down below. I appreciate all of those so much. But with that said, I'm on episode 80. I think we're going to go to 100, and I think then we're going to start a new series, which I have brewing, which is going to be relatively interesting. And I'm going to try to add more value as we do this. So we'll see what we have cooking. If you've been here since the very beginning, since 2021, even beginning of 2022, I appreciate you so much. Keep on rocking with me. We have more exciting stuff to come. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.